Hello my peoples. Today we're reviewing the Sigma 16mm DC DN F1.4 contemporary lens. They know how to give them some names, don't they? I'll go over the specs, then I'll show you some photographs and videos I took with the lens on a trip to the lake. Then we'll go over my pros and cons. Will it get my seal of approval? I'll tell you a little later in the video. Also, before we get started, all the photos and videos in today's show were recorded on the Sigma 16mm F1.4 lens on my Canon M50, unless otherwise stated in the bottom right-hand corner. Because if the lens is in the shot, then it's not on the camera recording that video. Anyway, I'm actually using it right now. And looking up here at the monitor, it seems a little tight. See, in my previous video, that Rokinon 12mm f2.0 lens has sported me. I am sported. Yes, it's a pain in the butt focusing, especially like when you're sitting in front of the camera you up here. Oh, am I in focus? Am I not in focus? Oh, arthritic hand. But man, I love that lens. Okay. Let's first get the specs out of the way and then we'll roll on to the content I created. Roll that beautiful beam footage. Right, Ella? She don't care. This is the Sigma 16mm f1.4 DCD in contemporary lens. It's available in the Sony E-mount, Canon EFM, Micro Four Thirds, and L-mount options. At almost 3 inches thick, 4 inches long, and weighing in at 405 grams, it's made mostly of hard plastic with a metal base, a large rubber focus grip, and a mount constructed from brass. It feels solid and well made. It has a 67mm filter thread and a minimum focusing distance of 10 inches. It comes with front and rear lens caps, a lens hood, and is dust and splash resistant. You can pick it up new for around $400.
Like water on a glass table. Like water on a glass table. You roll over me. Like water on a glass table. Like water on a glass table.
Oh man, looking at that footage and looking back on it, it's like, oh, My white balance was off. Oh, it's overexposed. Oh, it's underexposed. I should have moved this direction. Oh, being a perfectionist sucks. Anyway, I really enjoyed using this lens. For both video and photo, it was great for both. I even used it for my branding shots, and while it's the heaviest and largest EFM lens I ever used, it didn't get in the way of me getting the shots that I wanted. The sharpness and the quality of the content I was able to create with this lens was optically excellent. Let's go over my pros and cons. We'll start with the cons first and get those knocked out. Con number 1, focus motor noise. In no way does it sound like the Sigma 18-35 gear grinding focus noise, but it's not completely silent either. If you're a perfectionist, it'll get on your nerves, especially when you're editing videos with the headphones on. Here's an example of me walking toward the camera where you can hear the lens focusing. It's not the worst I've ever heard, but when there's no vocal, you can hear it. Both a shotgun mic and the onboard camera microphone will pick it up. Number 2, slow rack focus. It's not as fast as Canon's lenses on the M50 when racking focus. Not sure if it's just my copy of the lens, but in my experience, the traveling time from one focus point to another in video was a little slow. Some of you might prefer that. It is a little more cinematic, but for me it was a little too slow. I also had issues with face tracking. When I got too far away from the lens, say 6 feet or more, it would lose my face and focus on the background. This is probably the camera's fault, so I'm not going to knock the lens for that. And all the other focusing modes, I didn't have any issues. The target acquisition was accurate, quick, and on point. It was only the rack focusing speed in the video I had an issue with, and that's really a personal preference thing that can easily be fixed in post. Number 3. No image stabilization. This isn't an issue when you're taking photos. The f1.4 aperture will allow you to crank up the shutter speed and freeze any movement, but for video, it's a problem. The Canon M50 does have digital image stabilization, and it worked better on this lens than my test with the Rokinon 12mm, but it's still useless for walking and talking video shots. It also crops in significantly. With that said, I did notice the digital image stabilization worked pretty well with panning side-to-side B-roll shots. It also smoothed out the jitters when standing still with the camera in your hands. Run and gun vlogging was too shaky and too tight for me personally, with and without digital IS. Even with the gimbal, the field of view was just too tight. 12mm seems to be the perfect focal length for vlogging on the go with an APS-C camera. On the con side, there's really not much to report. There's a little barrel distortion and a little chromatic aberration, but nothing major or out of control. Listing them as cons would be nitpicking to say the least, especially at this price point. Let's move on to the pros. Pro number 1, excellent sharpness and contrast. This lens is so sharp. It's the first thing you're going to notice. Even at f1.4, the center is sharp with some slight softness on the extreme edges. At f2.8, it's tack sharp across the entire frame, and it maintains a great contrast throughout the entire aperture range. It isn't until f10 that diffraction creeps in and those corners soften up. Pro number 2, decent flare and ghosting control. Wide-angle lenses are notorious for ghosting and lens flare when the front element is hit directly or indirectly by a bright light source. While it's not perfect, Sigma did a great job keeping it under control. It maintains contrast and the artifacts were minimal compared to the other wide-angle lenses I've tested. Number 3, excellent in low light. It can see better than the human eye in dark situations. It's really amazing and probably the strongest attribute about this lens. Even in candlelight, you can acquire a clean image. Number 4, excellent build quality. This lens is well made. It feels solid without being too heavy. Some vendors list it as being weather sealed, but personally I wouldn't trust it in a wet environment, especially considering the M50 is not weather sealed. Number 5, decent bokeh. At f1.4, you can get some really nice background blur. It's not super creamy, but it's not busy and distracting either. I liked being able to get a blurry background on a 16mm lens. You just have to be careful of the distortion. As with all lenses, the closer your subject gets to the lens, the stronger the bokeh gets, but so does the perspective distortion. Number 6. It's unique. It's the only decent wide-angle fast aperture autofocus lens for APS-C mirrorless cameras under $500, and for that I'm grateful to Sigma. And even though this lens is not as wide as I would like, and it doesn't have image stabilization, it excels at everything else. Coming in under $400 is an exceptional value, and a lens that I highly recommend. It definitely gets my seal of approval. Okay? Bam! What? Now what? Well, that's it for today's show. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below and I'll answer you. You can also catch me on Instagram here. I'll post some photos from today's show. If you like today's show, consider smashing that like and subscribe button. Remember to be kind to one another, because God knows we need more love and less hate in this world right now. Do you feel me? I am Todd Norris, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.